Okay, so we are live now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on From Vision to Code, Clashing the CTO, CPO, and Development Perspectives. This event is a natural follow-up to our survey and report titled From Vision to Code, Aligning Business with Software Development Objectives, where we explore the challenges and opportunities in bridging business strategy with development execution. Today we will dive a little bit deeper by examining the often different perspectives of CTOs, CPOs, and development teams and how they can work together to achieve alignment. My name is Mateusz, I'm Tech Evangelist at Brainhub, and I will have the pleasure of hosting today's webinar. And I would like to introduce our special guests, Jack Godau, Chief Technological Officer and Managing Director at Doctorly, Stefan Schuessler, Chief Product Officer and Independent Product Coach, and Alexandra Gepert, Head of Delivery at Brainhub. Jack, could you please tell us a bit more about yourself and your background?
Hi, thanks very much for having me today. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. So my background, very originally, I was a software developer, software architect, consultant, did all of those things. About 12, 15 years ago, I moved into the management stream. So I started leading departments, leading organizations, building technical teams, and making sure that the software that we delivered was the things that were necessary. So I bring quite a bit of experience from that side of the fence to the table.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Stefan, could you share a little bit about yourself and your experience?
Yeah, hi, I'm Stefan Schuessler. Recently was the CPO of Luccid, a startup in Berlin that used AI for basically going into the construction tech. I'm also father of a 9-month-old little child that I'm carrying today with me. So it's his first webinar as well. And almost like Jack, I also started a bit in the tech. I was a developer myself, and then I went into the product management part. And since a couple of years, basically went up there the ladder a little bit and went into the management track, being the head of product and lately as a CPO of a startup. And yeah, I'm also looking very much forward to put these perspectives today in. So yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. And Alexandria, could you please tell us a bit more about yourself as well?
Sure. So I'm a head of delivery at Brainhub, and I'm responsible for delivery processes of our projects. We are working according to the Prince to Agile methodology that we successfully started a year ago, and it's already completed. This is how we work. And my background is actually, working in companies like Brainhub, but also with more people on board, and also in startups. I'm mainly from fintech. Actually, I've been working in finance startups in the past. So yeah, happy to see how the discussion will go today.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this webinar is designed to be interactive, so we invite everyone to actively participate. Feel free to submit your questions at any time using the chat feature, and we'll make sure to address as many questions as possible during the webinar, but there is also dedicated Q&A section at the end. So now let's move on to the main part of our today's webinar. Since the core topic is revolving around software delivery, actually, allow me to start this with a question. In your opinion, what does software delivery excellence mean in your role? Jack, could you start?
Certainly, and there's a variety of things that people can consider excellence in software delivery. You have the strong developer perspective. Is it technically good? Is it using the right frameworks, the right tools, things like this? Then you have the product side of things, saying, does it do what the users want? Does it meet our purpose? And then ultimately you have the business side asking these questions, does it make us money, right? So, and I think over the years, my perspective on this has changed. Right? When I was a developer building software, I was interested in building technically good solutions. I was like, oh, is it like the right way to do this? Can we make it better somehow? Over the years, dealing more with the product side of things and eventually also being responsible for business success, it changes the perspective somewhat. And you do have to think about, okay, what's the best thing that we can do now with the given resources to get us to a further stage, especially in startups. This is a true challenge. Like, how good does it have to be? Do I need Kubernetes now, or can I wait till I have 101 users? That's the classic example.
Okay, thank you. And Stefan, what about you?
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. And I think, as you said, Jack, that's already kind of like the core. I mean, having worked in a couple of companies, you see, especially in Europe, so there's, as you also asked, in the European Union, what does it mean? It's a little bit different than what we do or what we've seen in the US, from a perspective of how to approach things, right? And what is really the right product. From a product management perspective, I put these two things in, like, building the right it and building it right. So, and I think these are very much these two things that we also have to reflect basically every day on. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement in most of the companies. Just very quickly explaining, the right it is basically, what is it that we want to build? How do we get there? So with all these questions, product discovery and so on, and we can go into the dev very soon after. And building it right is then the other way. How do I really make a product that everybody wants out of it, out of the right idea, now that I know that it is actually an idea that would probably prevail, that makes business, right? That's also the important part. So how do we get there? And I think these questions are, yeah, the daily questions in a product manager's life.
Okay, thank you. And Ola, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it will be right now a little bit different, as I'm managing, delivery processes that, are delivering projects to our clients. So actually, for us at Brainhub, software delivery excellence will mean three things. First of all is the continuous delivery. So whenever we work with a client, we are delivering the project. We want to ensure the world-class reliability, availability, security, and delivering, as many value as we can as soon as possible. The second one is that the solutions that we build together with the client need to be for business. Yeah, so any decisions that our technical people and other members of the development team are always around what business needs and how to provide it and how to maintain it in the future, that it will be easy. Yeah. And the last thing is, the closest to my heart, as I'm a project manager for so many years already. It's project governance. So in today's world, sometimes we are so focused on delivering, like, on iteration level, that we forget about the strategic stuff. Like, and for every project, for us, it means delivering the scope on time within the budget that we agreed. Of course, those things can change, but our role when we are working on delivering the projects is actually to keep it in a good place, measured and controlled as we go forward.
I think one thing to add here, this is something that's very interesting that you touched on, is this concept of change, right? I know very few projects that don't change, right? This is part of it as you're doing stuff. And
of course,
if you know the answer, if you know exactly where you want to be, people will hate me for this, but waterfall is best, right? Like, if you know, like, if there is a definite answer, waterfall is definitely best, it's definitely fastest, it's definitely shortest and cheapest in all factors. So this is something where software delivery excellence is also about flexibility. Like teams who, we can't change anything because we're in the middle of a sprint, right? Like, okay, so you're going to finish building something that we all know is worthless. This is not excellent. Yeah, like if in the middle of the sprint you discover that this feature is worthless or it's not going to work or whatever, like something happens, right? Then you have to have this flexibility, and I think that that's something where, despite what people think that they're doing when they say they're doing Agile, they're not actually remembering the principles behind Agile, and they are just working through a list of ceremonies. Yeah, we have a stand up every day, but we never change anything in the middle. We like do a retrospective, but every time we talk about the same problems, right? Like, and this is something where excellence is also about flexibility and the ability to improve, right? Like, what are we doing to get better? And it's different for different teams, right? Like, it depends what you're delivering. So I think that that's really an essential point, that excellence is not just the software, but it's also the process and the people, and how are we like doing these things together.
And very interesting point, and I agree. Seeing that also in my work as a head a lot is this idea of Agile, right? Often comes a little bit with this perspective of like, okay, we just start and then we see where we're going. So if you don't plan properly, how do you expect that the results will be good, right? This is the thing. It doesn't take away the planning, but as often is it taken, the sprint is starting and we need to, just put these stories in. The sprint is full, we will do the things. It doesn't help us anything. So if you don't sit down and really think about where do you want to head, then the product wouldn't be good. So this way or the other, you can do it in any method, it wouldn't be good. And this is where I also think we need to look a little bit beyond that, right? So what do we actually really want to achieve? And this is why I think in a lot of companies, I see this discussion about what Agile method to use. The discussion should be as like, how do we reaching the goal, right? And what do we have in our toolbox?
Yeah, I always say to my teams that if you are, having some decision to make, you actually need to assess how easy it will be to change it later on, or add to it. Yeah, work with the change, exactly like you said. So this is how we do it. Yeah, this is what we believe it's the best, to actually ask question also, what is the business impact of this change? Yeah, and like you said, we need to properly plan, because otherwise it will be just chaos, and this chaos will be visible for the end users in the end. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And development is changing because business is actually changing. It's learning itself as well. It's like there are always new features, new needs. So it always has to adapt. So therefore, development is also adapting. I will put also my perspective as tech evangelist at Brainhub. For me, the software delivery excellence is basically making business-oriented implementation decisions. So there has always to be an alignment between business and actual development. And as part of my responsibilities, I'm setting up a mindset within the team that we are asking the right questions. Why and how we are doing some solutions, how will our final product benefit from it. And to make such kind of informed decisions, we can see that there needs to be an alignment between business and development. So my very next question is, how do you ensure that product development aligns closely with business strategy and market needs?
Maybe I can just start here, right? So that is something that I'm also teaching, mentoring in a lot of sessions with product managers. I think that is the main job that a product manager also has to do. So this alignment with the business side. What we often do, especially since there's this role of a product owner, which is often nobody else than somebody who is a backlog manager, and then putting the stories into the team and making sure that the team is running and through, and very busy with that. we always forget the other side. And actually, product management should exactly answer this kind of question. Why are we doing that? So how do we align? There's a company, and the company has a goal. And the goal of the company is to make money. Sure. But often, let's say, at least in, let's say, the little bit startupish world, or they're companies that have a certain purpose, they want to also reach something. So it's not just about making money. This is often in the B2C. You see that things are done so that they can work. It should be good enough, all good. Also there you need an excellency, don't get me wrong. But when you want to build a really excellent product, if you want to build something that sticks, that is different than all the rest, you need to make this thinking before. You need to understand how to get in there. You need to understand how do you discover your market? How do you actually understand what the user wants? Or how do you make certain, let's say, decisions that you don't even know in which direction to go? And this is the most important topic. So you have to ask a lot of questions at the beginning. And this is what is crucial, and not just looking, okay, we want to build a product, we have this assumption, so we're going in here, how can you bring it down and how can you make a product out of it? Now go. No, we have to ask these questions first. Okay, why are we building it? Only then I think we can give it to the teams, and the teams can actually understand, okay, there's really something in it, somebody thought about it. And I think that makes a big difference already in the motivation. But yeah, would like to hear the other side as well.
I think that's a really good point, and something. And you talked about product owners or product managers being backlog managers. I think we've all seen that. People who are like fighting, oh, let's do this story, let's do that story, let's like build such and such. You lose focus on the value sometimes. Why are we doing a certain feature? What will it bring us? Will it bring us more users, higher retention, more this, more that? And this is something it's very important to consider, and it's important to bring this understanding to the rest of the team as well. It's not enough for business people, CEO, salespeople to understand the business goals. It's not enough just for the product owner to understand the value of a certain thing. It has to be understood across-wise from everybody. Sure, maybe like some technical people might not be interested in this, but to explain to them how important such a feature is for the users. What does it mean to the users when they're using it? What's the effect on people's lives? Potentially, I was doing healthcare software until recently, so this has a meaningful effect on people's lives. Like getting this wrong or not building it is really like a difficult choice then in certain times. So I think here, to really be able to align these things, you need to have those people or representatives of those groups in the room when you're talking about this, and you need to put these things onto a framework. It doesn't have to be complicated, which actually addresses the value question. And one of these like very simple things that I've had a lot of success with is you simply have a 4x4 matrix, like how valuable is it and how hard is it to implement. The things that have no value and are hard to implement are things you just never do, right? Like all right, these are things we shall not do because they're hard to do. They provide little value. The things that are easy to do and provide high value, of course, they make sense. It's those two squares in the middle. Like we're not sure. It might be a bit hard. Those are the things where it then becomes the discussion points, because some of those like it naturally filters for like the extremes. And then it's that middle slice where you have to think about, all right, do we do this first or that first? But having technical representatives, product representatives, and business representatives in that conversation to align these things, that's really important.
Yeah, definitely, because what you said is because right now we are working with we have a separate project, separate stakeholders for each, and I myself been working in a startup, and I remember as those features that have no impact and are super hard to implement should never go into the backlog, but sometimes it's a favorite feature from the CEO, and you need to do it because there's no alignment on some level, of course, sometimes. And I would say that right now for us, it's easier when we are working as an external party to some extent, because we are not tied with any internal politics inside the company. We can ask very uncomfortable questions like, hey, it doesn't look like a right feature at the moment, because, and we can provide like a full information of how the discussion was going, what context is missing, what we are not taking into consideration, plus the expertise of the experts we have in-house is from different setups. It's startups, it's big projects, it's legal, technical debt projects that were going over for years. So this is actually, from my side, the right stakeholders management. It's also very important to, like you said, get the right people in the room, like in event storming, right? And just ask the right questions to them, so they will answer. Maybe not the first time, but they will know they need to think about something. Otherwise, it will not bring value that we want.
Yeah, I think like the politics issue is a big topic, right? But it's also, like you said, in startups, investors come with their opinions about what is important. They also come with a bucket of money, right? And so sometimes their opinion, while like it's not really important, it is really important because they're bringing a bucket of money. Like this is the real world we live in, right? Like, and having these discussions and really saying, okay, you want that? We don't think it's going to actually drive the needle forwards in customer acquisition or retention or whatever else. You do want it, but you understand that if you make us build this, we're not going to be able to build all of these other things where we actually have clear paths to real value. Can you have those discussions with your investors? What are the relationships like? Or what are the relationships like with your CEO? Does he force things, or is he or she open to discussion? This is a kind of organizational culture thing. And this is also the thing. The organizational culture is what allows this to happen or prevents it from happening. If you don't have the right kind of culture where people can't talk, can't discuss, are not involved in decisions at the right level. I'm not saying everybody should be involved in every decision, because then you can never get anywhere too. But having people involved at the right level from the right areas, that culture allows for this to work. And we see that again and again in startups that work. There's collaboration, people work together, they have similar goals or the same goal across multiple departments. The ones that fail, it's usually collaboration, working together, pulling in the same direction. Those are like key signs of failure in these organizations.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Jack. And that's the interesting thing. I mean, wherever you go, you have certain restrictions, right? Somebody wants something, and you always have somebody with a good opinion, right? Knowing things better. So what we need to manage here is really like, how do we get to decisions that are made based on facts, right? And it's hard. That's not easy. Even in the new world with ChatGPT, where you can really use this intelligence to research things much faster and so on, it is still hard to bring the things on the point and basically make decisions accordingly, right? And tell everybody, okay, this is, you think it is, but numbers look different. So how do we go there? How do we experiment? And that is also, from our side as product managers, the most important thing. I think often we just go into one direction. And this is then where we end up being backlog managers, because decisions be made, now go. This is a big feature, work, work, work. How can we get into the mode that we experiment much more, that we see, okay, this works, that works. You have an opinion, I have an opinion, third person has an opinion. So we're going in that direction. We all don't know what the future really is and who will use the product, how. So we have to test it. And the best thing wins. And this is what successful companies really do. We can argue a lot about that. There's also, kind of misuse of all these things. And often it goes into certain directions that maybe are also a little bit questionable. But the essence it is, if you want to really get into something, you have to experiment. And I think that is something we do in Germany, and the European Union in general. I think a little bit less than that is done in the US or even Israeli companies. What I know, they are much more open to that and trying that. And I think this is something we should employ as a habit.
It also depends on your sector, right? Like, can you experiment,
Yes.
right? Like when you're like at Dr. Lee, where I was before, when you're in highly regulated healthcare software, there's some things that you have to build, whether you want to or you don't want to. There's ways that you have to implement these. And then it does become a struggle. Like, do I build this regulated piece that I need, or do we build some feature that users actually want? Like, and how do you balance these? But here again, like the important thing is what you specifically just said, Stefan, finding a way to define that and to have a common language for, okay, we're going to like assume that this feature will have a certain value. And then we can rank things by the ones that are the most valuable, or the ones that are easy to do and the most valuable. And once you have that common language, then you can actually start talking about, all right, this beats that because of reason, not this beats that because I want it. And that's a very clear differentiation.
Yeah, and very good fact about this regulative industry. So I haven't worked in health tech, but I've worked in fintech, so which is also a regulated industry. However, there, I mean, it's not really about the lives; it's about the money of people often, right? And there's certain things that have to be absolutely secured, especially if you're under the watch of BaFin and so on and so forth. But what I learned there as well, and what I realized is, if you only look from a regulative perspective, you will very, very quickly go into a route which is like super secure and nice and good, but it takes away the possibility to think a little bit out of the box, right? So this is why I think startups are still very, very important. And also here, once again, we have a different mindset, right? So we like to do things really right from the beginning, as Europeans, as Germans specifically, I would say. And regulation is kind of like a good thing. A lot of people even like it. I'm personally not so much of a fan, but that is a personal thing. While other mentalities really just try to be, let's try what it is, and then we can think about how do we make it really safe. How do we meet the regulations, right? This is also about the dialogue in this case.
I would also add to that control is very important. Whenever you are pushing out some feature that's supposed to be great, you need to know how you want to measure this greatness, right? And with metrics, it's easy to measure what is easy to measure. And in this, assumption phase, it's super hard to define what we are actually measuring to check if we are on track. Yeah, because all these regulatory things, you can just approach them in experimental way, in a way like, what minimum we can do actually to serve the regulation and focus on something else. Yeah. So yeah, this is what is the most tricky part for me personally. Yeah, the metrics, because when you show that, hey, we delivered that in this and this time, yeah, well, everybody is happy because the deadline is met. But what is going after? Like, are people using it, or any other metric you want to see? So this is also helping, yeah, all these things that we said, and also have a process to control if we are really bringing the value. Yeah, so not stopping after release, move forward.
Yeah. And that's actually like quite scary, how many people deliver software without any kind of analytics. Like
Yeah.
what are the users doing? We don't know. We think like this, so we see such and such in the logs, but we don't know anything about the behavior. We've spent 6 months building whatever feature it is, and we have no idea whether it's good, other than like, well, we get bug reports from users, obviously, because something is broken, but that doesn't tell us like anything about how it's being used, why it's being used. So I think that this is very important. What you've brought up, Alexandra, is to say like, okay, you think that you have a certain value, you do it, you experiment with it, perhaps ideally cheaply if you can, and then you see, does that work, right? Like it's like otherwise it would be like a scientist doing an experiment but not actually checking the results. It would be like everybody would say they're crazy, right? But in software or in product delivery, we do this all the time, where we build stuff, we like think about it a long time, we invest a lot, and then nobody looks to see does it work, right? And this is something that I'm astounded by how many, or how few companies invest anything in analytics at all.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also this change topic that you said, right? That everyone is so scared that they made wrong decision. Well, for sure they did. And it's fine, but we can actually change it. So this is the greatest thing about change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you get it right all the time, the thing that you should do most is play the lottery. Yeah, like
Exactly. Yeah, and I think we need to be much more open to actually say that we make a decision, but we go into a certain direction, and then we look whether it works or not. That's comes again with this experimenting, right? Even if you have something regulated, you still put it there, and then you see, okay, does that work? Does it fit in that way?
Yeah.
So the mindset around it should still absolutely be the same. I agree. Yeah, so I also think, as you said, metrics, there's these two things, looking what the user does, but also measuring yourself, right? So, all this OKR topics. Is it like, how do you really think first of like what would make you actually deliver excellency? So what would you say, okay, in this case, it's 100% good. We often don't do that. We start with things we don't want to think, because the thinking is quite heavy. You have to do a lot of things. You have to know a lot of things. But only if you do that, then you can really look, okay, actually, that was my assumption at the beginning, and now we're here, right? And it's never like that, but because you're learning. And this is, I think, what we should also have a much more look of when we want to talk about how to make it excellent product. It's like, how do we think first, and how do we measure whether we're actually going against the right goals?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I may, one more thing, because what you just said is super important. Plus, we are always talking about developing a product, but the product needs to actually also serve the strategy goal that company has, right? So it's much more easier to have the strategy goal assigned, like all together. Yeah, it can be assigned by, it depends how the organization is doing it. Most probably board or investors will be there as well. Yeah, but then it's easier to make those decisions. Yeah, if they are really helping us to achieve the goal, or we are just building something because we think it might be great, and we can do it still. Yeah, but let's not go into the pet features, right? Because I just think it will be great.
Exactly. Funny anecdote. I really worked in companies where the main OKR, business OKR, was let's make more money. Let's double the revenue. Okay, thanks. That's great to know that we have actually a financial goal, and that we, which was obviously also driven through the investors and so on. But what does it mean? I mean, that doesn't translate into anything, right? So this is, you can also omit that. I mean, everybody knows that you want to do. This is not a strategy, and this is what we need. So it needs to start there. It's like, how? And this is the job then of the business side of the CEO to really translate that. And maybe product and also tech helping to figure out, okay, how can we do that? And it's all about the communication in the end. If we, isolate ourselves, and the one person believes knowing it all and going that direction, and the others don't feel like that makes sense at all, then you will have the disconnect. And so that's a very, very important thing.
Yeah. I like what you said though, like companies exist to make money. All of them. Startups exist to make money, to prove to their investors. This is like having this as an honest goal and actually saying like, we're honestly here to make money. This is fine. But I do agree with you. What's important to back that up is having an actual vision and a culture and values to make that happen, right? And like when we're talking about this excellence framework, you can't have software delivery excellence by itself. Like you can't have an excellent development team in a company that is otherwise also like not communicating, doesn't have a vision. It doesn't work. And I think that that's something where like people sometimes assume that these are a separate thing, and that development teams, why is development so slow? Like, why does it take them so long to build something? And like, we've all heard that, like, why is it taking you forever to build this? It's like, well, you haven't decided what we should build for 3 months. So now it took us 4 weeks to build it, which isn't actually very long if you consider that like 3 months before, 12 weeks, you spent thinking about should we build A or B, right? Like, so in these situations, you have to look at the holistic picture and not just the delivery side.
Yeah, and regarding to our recent report that we are conducting, you already have answered all the most frequent answers, and they are actually regular communication, clear objectives and measures. That's quite clear. What's important, there are many ways how we can achieve that, and there were tactics like sync meetings, alignment sessions, workshop, discovery, roadmap plannings, and many other combinations. So it's all about communication. So the feedback loop has to be set up, and then we can just define clear objectives. And the most frequent framework that was mentioned was actually OKRs. So we have quite clear objectives, and there are key results that are measurable, that are achievable, and the team exactly knows what to achieve. And in terms of decisions, let's assume that the objectives are clear, quite clear, and the development has been completed. So the code is right now ready for deployment. The next question: how do we make deployment decisions that balance the needs of business development and operations?
I think, if I can start on this one, we had a very different deployment setup to other companies. And you have these DORA metrics, people talking about deployment frequency, things like this, where the frequency of deployment is something that's considered to be great, right? Like they want deployments all the time, any moment. We had very clear indicators from our users, like we don't ever want the software to change in the middle of while we're working with it. Like, we're doctors, we're prescribing medication. Like the way we prescribe medication can't change in the middle of the day. So our ideal deployment frequency was once per night, right? And this is something where we're dealing with German doctors who work business hours during the day, right? It's something that's not, we're not an e-commerce platform. We don't have like millions of users. It's a different setup. So I think that this is also something where you have to consider your users, your product, and what's appropriate for that. Initially, we started deploying just every 2 weeks because the users were very reluctant to see change. The fact that we got onto nightly release cycles was actually because the technical side, myself and the rest of the technical teams, get pushing, like, we can't keep waiting. We have to, this stuff has to move, otherwise it's blocking other stuff. So this was actually like the switch to nightly was a technical driven decision. The users would have been very happy to stay with every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think this what you said, the most important thing is you have to understand the surrounding, right? So what are you in? What is your customer? In B2C is a completely different topic than in B2B. Even if your customers are not doctors, but most of the people, like in a bank, for example, most of the stuff still goes on the daytime. So you don't want to interrupt that. You don't want to go into that moment when everybody is like trying to do the things and it's importantly, and especially then considering even which kind of user would be affected, and so on. Another aspect that I find very interesting is also about how can we test certain things if we deploy, right? Do we deploy it right to everyone, or what is often done, you just deploy it to a certain subset of people to see what is happening. And I think this is also a fair strategy that you have to consider if you want to be a little bit more on the safe side, right? Seeing whether things are crashing or things are, maybe not going very well. It shouldn't crash. Actually, you should always be on the safe side on that. But yeah, sometimes it doesn't work. But still, there's always things when there's a risk when you deploy something that something will be unexpected. So I think there's no one fits all here. You really have to look into what are your customers, what are your users, and how do you make it most seamless for them? Because I don't want to be interrupted on the most important thing that I want to do. If I want to wire money now and have to, I don't want to have to wait for, I don't know, 5 minutes to come back. Sometimes that's already a no-go.
And even in just plain commerce, like if it crashes while they're in the checkout mode, and then they're like, I couldn't buy it here. Like, who cares? I'll buy it somewhere else, right? There's like your commerce platforms are not unique. Like, people can get shoes or food or whatever they want from a variety of sources. If yours is not working, then that's problematic. And I think what you said is very important. Having an ability to test stuff is great, but we know that software is not perfect. It's no such thing as bug-free software. We also know that the real difficulty is in the real world. Like, the test cases are all the things we thought of. The users are all the things we didn't think of. So they will ultimately provide true validation and do things in completely different ways. Like, they'll fill out the form from the bottom to the top, or like whatever it is. And so having this ability to deploy to a subset is important. But also then, what do you do with failures? Can you use things like feature flags to isolate failures? And feature flags are great, but if your change requires a change to the database structure, a feature flag won't help you, because once you've changed the database structure, it's very hard to go backwards and forwards easily, especially if there's a lot of data or any kind of complexity around this. So I think here, the ability to test, the ability to deploy specifically, isolatedly, and feature flags, and some plan of what to do when it fails, because it will at some point fail, right? What will you do then? Will you try and roll back and risk losing data? Will you escalate and try and roll forwards quickly? Will you stop this instance and switch the users over? So you need to have a plan and a strategy in place for what happens when it goes wrong.
Yeah, so actually for us here, just to add again, the context of of an external party that is supporting, actually could support you guys. We would anyway ask for permission. We would set up a process with the full checklist that you just mentioned. Is this, how much we can be secure while doing the release, and of course always something might go wrong, and I saw it so many times, it's like, it's almost normal. But what we are already doing as well is build our software in a way that it will be easier to deploy. All this infrastructure stuff, we are making sure that we are following the best practices to at least decrease or manage the risk of with every release, and decrease the risk. So because all of that you said, it can be specific for the project, of course, but there are some general rules to actually make it easy to make that decision. And of course, with those specific cases, I've been also doing clear out for release, like in the middle of the night, just because we had to do it like this. And but it's not something that's it can't be figured out by a process. So anyway, as always, for the deployment, there needs to be very decent process to follow in order to make the decision. Not speaking about the feature readiness, because sometimes we are committing to deliver something, and you know how it is. Like 1 week is passing, second week is passing, and we're supposed to already test it very much, and we didn't because something happened along the way, and but the deadline is not changing. So what are we gonna do? Like in my at my work, I would go to the customer and say, far before the second week, like right away, that hey, there might be a risk that we will not be able to deploy at this date, and cut the scope most probably, or check if we can change the date. I'm not a fan of changing the due dates, actually. So this is sometimes very specific. Like how much we want something, and is it ready? And how to find this balance between just pushing for pushing because we said we will deliver it. And I'm always saying to the team, like, guys, why you didn't say earlier? We are not ready. Like, nobody will kill us for like 2 days of delay but they will definitely have something to say if something will broke. Yeah, because we didn't like test some paths or something. Yeah, because we didn't have time. So it's also something about finding this, this balance afterwards, and speak with the business, right? Like, hey, what we gonna do? You're here to make the decision for us. Yeah.
That's a very interesting aspect, and that also kind of leads me to another thought I had. You said earlier, Jack, that the better, there's this perception that the more often the better, right? The deploy. We also know that there's major apps out there. They have like, I don't know, 2-3 releases a year, because that's how they do it. Is that necessarily bad? Not per se, I would say. So it's also a question about the expectation. But then the question is also how do you handle that, right? So because releasing once in 6 months, you have to release a lot. You have to go through a lot of things. Regression tests are huge, and so on and so forth. So this is a thing which also has to be planned, right? And then I can relate very much to that. What you said, Alexandra, is we're not ready yet. So if you already put these kind of times into stone, you will always have the situation that at a certain point you feel like, oh, we should test another day, because we're not exactly there. We're doing basically a couple of days before, we're trying to finish everything, and then we think about. And if something goes wrong and we haven't tested and all the paths yet and so on, this is what we figure out. Of course, you can try to plan it very nicely. You can put buffers in and so on. But reality is often that, you try to clamp in as much as you can in the end anyways, because this is business and we want to hard it. So if we are not so hard on these deadlines and say, okay, good, quality is most important and not the deadline, then I think this is a little bit of a shift that we can get there. And I'm absolutely with you. Nobody will die when it, mostly, I mean, we're not talking about health, but nobody will have even a major impact if some things come a few days later, or even a week or something like that. This most of the time is not the case. Of course, you have this whole thing. If you have a communication already ongoing, if you have the marketing rolling and the data set and printed somewhere, we understand that part. But then we also have to make sure that you can steer from that before.
Yeah, actually, for this, because we started with software excellence, yeah, software delivery excellence, and exactly like you said, it's not so important so much. Yeah, we need more time. It's always okay, but when you said it that you need more time, one day before the release, or that you already could see that something is not going according to the plan, yeah, because the plan will change. No worries. And you need to deal with it. So whenever I work with the engineering team I've been working, I always said, guys, I'm not pushing for the deadline because I like deadlines. I like being responsible for what I said before. Yeah, I like us to be responsible for what we are doing and that our customers can rely on us. It doesn't mean that we'll meet every deadline. Most probably we won't, but we will tell them that, hey guys, this is the reality. Yeah, these are the options we can have, and of course you will be doing the decision as a business side, but this is being responsible and this is being excellent as well. It's being excellent. It's not making any mistakes. It's just measuring the impact of the things we didn't know and telling that, hey, it looks like this right now. We need to do something about it. Just not hide it. Yeah, just be there and be actually brave to say that it's not the time. Yeah, I'm not clearing for release because we are not ready, and we didn't do it. It's fine.
I want to give one simple tip to the teams out there. How can you know, are you going to make it on time? And my tip that I've been using for years and trying to get people to use for years is like, once you have a period of time to build something, it might be 2 weeks, might be 2 hours. When half the time is gone, does it feel like you're halfway or more? And if the answer is no, you will be late. That's it, right? Like, it's like, you maybe don't know how much late, but if half the time is gone and it doesn't feel like you've done half the work, right? It's the same if you're like climbing a mountain. if half the time is gone before the daylight is gone and you're not at the summit, you should turn back now, right? It's like just a very easy way. Be like, we're 10% done, we're 93% done. Too accurate. 50% people can fairly easily judge, like even with a gut feeling. Like a developer you can say, look, do you think you're halfway finished? Right? And they will say yes or no. And it's quite accurate, this answer. If you ask them for a percentage completion, you'll get all kinds of strange numbers, right? But like this halfway mark, it's easy, it's understandable, and it usually gives everybody else enough time to adjust when the answer is no, right? Like, so it's a good safe buffer.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. I'll share it with my team internally for sure. Like, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing regarding our report, what I found quite curious is, as you said, there is no one strategy that will solve anything. And what I found also quite interesting is who is responsible for making such decisions. And there are so many different roles in different organizations that are responsible to making deployment decisions that I will just give you some examples. That there are QA-based decisions, so there has to be something tested. There are product owners because they are more aligned with current business objectives. There are release team in general, release management. So there are many actually strategies that can just put a framework to making a deployment decisions, but there was one crucial factor that you mentioned. There has to be a risk management. Are we prepared to a situation that something is broken, basically? And you always have to have a strong rollback mechanism, no matter in what way. It doesn't matter, but you have to be prepared. Of course, there are things like feature flags and so on, but you have to be prepared, and that's what was basically the most frequent factor mentioned in our responses. And what I found also curious, that there are really few companies that are making deployments on demand. So it's like, let's say, developer-driven decision making. So something is developed, developer considers it as done and deploys, and this is very rare. But as you mentioned, there are different expectations, because sometimes it's not the objective to deploy on demand. Maybe to release barrier are also fine. So yeah, here alignment with actual business objectives is also quite crucial.
And the interesting thing about the rollback, when you need to do the rollback, because sometimes you are deploying to production, something is broken, and you have on-call team, they are trying to bug fix. There always needs to be an information or a person that would just actually say, it's not gonna work, we need to roll back. Yeah, just a thought that it's super important to have it in the checklist as well for the rollback. Not to do it maybe right away if we can see and identify the bug and maybe fix it with another release, small release, hotfix release. But yeah, this is crucial as well.
I think if this, because we're slowly coming towards the end of time, has there been any questions that have been asked in the chat? Is there anything that we should address so that people have a chance before we run out of time?
Yeah, and as everyone can see, there are many strategies regarding decision making. We have been talking about deployment decision making. We have been talking about tech decision making. So there are many tactics, many strategies, many tool sets and methodologies, and so on. So my final question is reflecting on our discussion. What do you see as the most significant, most crucial factor in achieving excellence in software delivery across business, product, and engineering teams?
Before we answer, Jack, answering your question before, there are no questions so far in the chat. So, yeah.
Well, then, like the answer to your question, Mateusz, I think communication, alignment, like the fact that these things are considered to be separate is where the problem lies. Like, if you have communication between the business side, the product side, the development side, the QA side, all of these contributing factors, that is the factor for success. Of course, each individual needs to be good at their job. If you're building a house and the plumber is not competent, then the pipes will leak. Yes, like this is like a fact of life. But if you're building a house and none of those people talk to each other, the whole house will be in danger. Yeah, and this is the difference between having things that are broken and can be fixed, or not building the right thing. And that only works with, I think, good communication between the departments and inside the departments, individually inside the teams, explaining to people what's the vision, why are we doing it, when does it have to be done, what do we expect of you to do, and then how can we help you to do those things. Asking those questions and having those conversations, I think, for me, are the biggest factor in successful delivery.
I would agree very much on that. Always nothing new to add here. I think the most important thing for me is really the alignment at the very beginning, and that everybody, despite their role, really knows their role, and they should be the experts in that. That is true, but they can't see themselves isolated and just going for their own goals, right? So like sales is just running after the numbers. Because we know even this concept about the local peak and the overall peak, right? So it's like if you just try to optimize here for a certain thing, you will miss out the big picture and you will miss out bigger opportunities. So this is where this alignment needs to come in. And unfortunately, I see that in a lot of companies is that, like, at the beginning, when they are a small startup, there's this drive, the founder is there and they know all where they want to go. And then when it goes further and more people come and the goals are getting a little bit diverse, more products, more whatever, then all these kind of things go a little bit, ballistic, and nobody really knows, okay, what should we do? And then the founders sometimes even like, why don't we, are we not as good as we were before? Why don't we have this excellency that we used to have? The complexity of stuff, why is it rising up? All these kind of things we have to understand and bring in. And I think communication is really the key here, and letting everybody involved and align on one key goal.
Yeah, well, for me, actually, it's one thought that we are always so focused on building effective development teams. And I kind of have a feeling sometimes that we forget that the product team is also a part of development team. So they actually need to be there daily. Yeah. I don't want to see like development teams struggling daily, like, taking notes. We need to ask business what to do about it. No, the business should be there and answer the question right away. Yeah. Or at least during the same day. Yeah. So as I said, of course, communication. Yeah. And this is, funny because whenever we are discussing something that is related with, many people involved, there will be an answer that we need a proper communication. Yeah. But it's actually not a cliche. It's just like it is. Yeah. It's the reality. So communication management is actually one of the areas of project management, the most important one. Even scope or time or budget is not so important as the communication. Yeah.
Absolutely
I
agree.
was actually at an event yesterday where we talked a lot about Conways Law, where like organizations build software that looks like the organization. So if you have separate product people and separate development people, there will be a gap in the things that you build between those. So putting people together in the right groups to build the things that you want to build is super important. And organizations are, if it's a startup with 4 people, you don't need structure. Everybody just does everything, right? And those people are super motivated. Those people are super involved. But once you grow to organizational size, you need structures because people need a manager. They need a team lead. Your holidays have to go somewhere. All of these things have to happen. But you can still make smart decisions about how to do it. And one of the things that we did in my time at Doctorally, We stopped having product and development, and we just had product development. And it was our fault and our problem and our responsibility together to make things work. And you could no longer say, oh, it's product's fault, or it's engineering's fault, or it's cute, because you're one thing. It's like, you know, you're blaming yourself, which is effectively true then when something goes wrong. But this like trying to cut down the boundaries is super useful. And again, it's about lines of communication, ways people work together, and the access that they have to each other.
Yeah, and what I find most significant in achieving excellence in software delivery is actually making sure that all decisions are aligned with business purpose. And I usually am achieving it by asking for a reason for some decisions. Because if someone can answer me why we are doing things the way we do, I know, and the response is related to business purpose, then I know that this excellence is basically achieved or is in a good direction right now. And that's why I really like ask my teams the question with why, and they may hate me for that, but sometimes it directly shows places that we have no answers, or we have to investigate, communicate with client and understand his vision, or maybe there are some gaps in his vision and we can still talk about it. So I'm always aiming for reasoning why we are doing things in a certain way. Okay, I think that we covered all of the most important topics today. Quite a discussion, and Roman is actually thanking us. Yeah, and about the challenges that were spoken. Yeah, there are many of them, and if you have any questions, you can still ask us in our chat. We try to answer them. Yeah, and we can wait a little bit. But I would ask for any other factors actually, and how do you achieve actually this significant factor in your companies? It's like we talk a lot about communication as the most significant factor. So what is the easiest way to achieve it in your opinion?
Manage
For me,
it.
it's
Sorry.
putting
Yeah, go
people
ahead.
together.
Yeah.
Putting people together, and like the people who are working together, like I don't mean physically, like I'm not a fan of return to office, just to be very clear about this. It has like for certain meetings and certain events it makes sense, but in general it doesn't. But giving people ownership, giving them the shared responsibility and saying, look guys, this is like you're building this, like whether it's like a feature or tooling or whatever they're building, they have to be responsible for it. They have to feel some ownership for it. They have to have the ability to do it. And giving somebody ownership, like if you give me ownership of like heart surgery, it's going to cause problems, right? Like people should not do that. But assuming the team has the skills and they have the ownership and a clear mandate of what to do, then it's possible for them to succeed. If they're dependent on some other team and another person and something here and something there, of course it makes them struggle because they have to wait 2 days for an answer, or they have to like check with like Johnny whether it's okay to deploy today or not, right? So this is really like the right people with ownership, with the right skills, and as best as we can, slightly autonomously. Right, like teams do have interactions. You know, we have APIs, we have like all of these connection points, but trying to minimize this distraction and trying to minimize this like external influence is super important.
I would like to add on that. I think it's also important to make sure that there's the right mindset in the company. As I'm also doing coaching as a product manager, I often encounter product managers having this very fixed mindset. So I can't change that. The boss will change it anywhere, or my whatever supervisor, or the external person or whatsoever. It's not in my hands. And this kind of like, and why are we doing that? Just because sales want that, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of like a thing that really goes into the problem of the communication then, because people then go back and they don't talk anymore. With let's say the growth mindset, you go into this as a challenge. This is my opportunity to make things better, right? So I having actually a mandate here to do that. And I think this is so important to keep people in this kind of mindset. You can make a mistake. There will be things you will be overruled, or your idea won't be the one that is succeeding. This is all good, but we're all trying to do it on the best, and then we're making the decision together. So implementing that starts at the top. So if you don't do that, if you don't allow that from a management perspective, if you just want the people to work for you, if you have this control thing, then you won't achieve that. So you have to make sure that your organization is exactly having the mandate to say out these things and poke the people and let them poke each other when they're going into this like, why are we all doing this?
Okay,
if I may, so
of course.
as I said, communication needs to be managed. It's another process. Like we really like to talk, which is great. This is how ideas are born. But if people will be constantly just talking and we will not have a proper plan for how to cascade some information, how to give the room for them to work together in one place, as possible, then it will not work. So all the kinds of operational meetings that people need to feel that we know what we are doing, right? This is how the communication needs to be managed. This is what I meant at the beginning. Yeah, and of course agreeing with all that you said. It's all about people building the software in the end, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, there are no questions, so I think that we can finish. There are many thoughts, there are many answers, and discussion about decision making actually in product development, in software development, and about software delivery excellence. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward for seeing you at the future events. Thank you very much, guys. See you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.